The planet was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Its surface shimmered under 3 suns, bathing everything in hues of gold and violet. Strange, crystalline trees stretched toward the skies, their translucent leaves chiming softly whenever the wind brushed past them. This was where humans had made first contact with an alien species called the Valith. It was supposed to be a moment of triumph, a chance for Earth to prove it had grown beyond its violent past and could now stand among the stars as equals. Captain Laura Hayes stood at the edge of the landing site, her boots sinking slightly into the soft moss-like ground beneath her feet. She adjusted her helmet visor, taking in the sight of the towering Valith figures approaching from across the field. They were tall, almost twice the height of an average human, their bodies glowing, faintly with an inner light that pulsed gently like a heartbeat. Their faces, if they could even be called that, were smooth and featureless save for intricate patterns etched into their skin that shifted and changed as though alive. They moved gracefully, each step deliberate but unhurried, radiating a calmness that seemed almost otherworldly. Behind Hayes, the rest of the team waited nervously. There was Dr. Emily Ross, the ship's xenobiologist, clutching her datapad tightly. Lieutenant Daniel Carter, the pilot who had flown them here, fidgeting with his gloves, and Corporal Ethan Blake, a Marine whose presence felt both reassuring and intimidating. Blake carried himself differently than the others. While everyone else wore expressions of awe or curiosity, his face was hard, his jaw clenched. His hand hovered near the sidearm strapped to his thigh, even though orders were clear. No weapons were to be drawn, unless absolutely necessary. As the Valith drew closer, one of them stepped forward slightly, distinguishing itself as a leader. Through their translators, the humans learned its name was Kale. Kale spoke first, not with words but with sound, a series of harmonic tones that resonated deeply within the chests of those listening. The translation device buzzed softly before, relaying the message in English. "You have come far to meet us, why?" Hayes took a deep breath, stepping forward to respond. "We've traveled here seeking friendship," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "We wish to learn about your people and share our own knowledge. Together, we believe we can build something greater." Kale tilted, its head, the patterns on its body swirling faster as if processing this idea. After a pause, it replied, "Friendship is unknown to us. We seek harmony. Tell me, do your kind also value harmony?" Hayes hesitated briefly before nodding. "Yes, we strive for peace, though we admit our history has been complicated." "Complicated?" Kale echoed, the word translated awkwardly. "Explain." This question hung heavy in the air. Hayes glanced back at her team, silently asking for guidance. Dr. Ross offered a small nod of encouragement, while Carter avoided eye contact altogether, but it was Blake who caught her attention. He gave her a sharp look, shaking his head subtly. Hayes understood what he meant. They couldn't sugarcoat things too much. Honesty was key, especially when dealing with beings as intelligent as the Valith. "We've had conflicts in the past," Hayes admitted carefully, "but we've worked hard to overcome them. Humanity isn't perfect, but we're learning. That's why we're here, to show you that we're ready to move forward." Kale studied her for a long moment, then turned to address the rest of the group. "And what of these conflicts? What did they involve?" Again, Hayes faltered. She wasn't prepared for such direct questions so soon. Sensing her discomfort, Blake stepped forward, surprising everyone. His voice was low and gravelly compared to Hayes's measured tone. "Conflicts mean fighting," he said bluntly. "Sometimes over land, sometimes over resources, sometimes just because people don't agree. Wars happen when diplomacy fails. Fear." Valith shifted uneasily, their luminescent forms flickering like disturbed flames. Kale asked another question, its tone sharper this time. "And during these wars, are there rules?" Blake crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. "Rules exist, sure, but not everyone follows them. Some do things they shouldn't, things that hurt innocent people. Those are called war crimes." The word sent ripples through the gathered Valith. Their previously serene demeanor cracked, replaced by murmurs and whispers that sounded almost frantic. Hayes shot Blake a warning glance, but he ignored her, keeping his focus on Kale. The alien leader stared at him intently, its body glowing brighter with every passing second. What are examples of these war crimes? Kyle pressed, the translator struggling to keep up with the intensity of its inquiry. Blake didn't hesitate. Mass killings. Torture. Using weapons that cause unnecessary suffering. Things most civilized societies consider wrong. A hush fell over the group. Even Hayes found herself holding her breath, unsure how the Valith would react. For beings that valued harmony above all else, the concept of war crimes must have been utterly foreign and horrifying. Kale finally broke the silence, addressing the entire delegation. We will consider your words. Return tomorrow. We have much to discuss. With that, the Valith turned and walked away, their movements slower now, weighed down by whatever thoughts churned within them. As they disappeared into the distance, the human team exhaled collectively, tension easing slightly. Back aboard the Odyssey, the mood remained somber. Hayes convened a meeting in the main conference room, pacing back and forth as she addressed her crew. That could have gone better, she admitted. I think we overwhelmed them. You think? Blake retorted, leaning against the wall with his arms still crossed. They weren't ready for the truth. Maybe next time we should stick to the happy stuff. Dr. Ross frowned, tapping her pen against the table. But honesty is important. Ethan, if we lie to them, they'll find out eventually. And then what? And if we scare them off completely? Blake shot back. They might decide we're too dangerous to deal with. Did anyone notice how spooked they got when I mentioned war crimes? Carter cleared his throat, trying to diffuse the argument. Look, maybe we just need to ease them into it. Start with smaller details. Work our way up. Hayes nodded, grateful for the suggestion. Agreed. Tomorrow we'll focus on positive aspects of human history. Progress, innovation, cooperation. Let's give them a reason to trust us. Blake pushed off the wall, his expression grim. Just remember, Captain, trust cuts both ways. If we're not careful, we might end up regretting how much we reveal. As the meeting dispersed, Blake lingered behind, staring out the viewport, at the shimmering landscape below. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking a tightrope, one misstep, and everything could come crashing down. The next morning, the human delegation returned to the meeting site with a renewed sense of purpose. Captain Laura Hayes had spent hours preparing for this encounter, carefully selecting examples of humanity's achievements to present to the Valith. She carried holographic displays showing images of Earth cities, medical breakthroughs, and collaborative efforts like the International Space Station. The goal was clear: to shift the focus away from humanity's violent past and highlight its capacity for progress and unity. As they approached the designated area, the Valith were already waiting. Kale stood at the forefront, its glowing form steady but noticeably subdued compared to the previous day. The patterns on its body shifted slowly, almost hesitantly, as if it were processing difficult thoughts. Hayes greeted the alien leader warmly, hoping to ease any lingering tension. We've brought some things to share, she said, gesturing for Dr. Emily Ross to activate the holograms. The first image appeared, a bustling cityscape filled with towering skyscrapers, green parks, and vibrant streets teeming with life. Hayes explained how humans had learned to build sustainable environments, balancing urban growth with nature. The Valith watched silently, their expressions unreadable, though their bodies pulsed faintly in response to the visuals. Next came a display of medical advancements, doctors performing surgeries, scientists developing vaccines and robotic prosthetics restoring mobility to those in need. Hayes emphasized that these innovations stemmed from humanity's desire to heal and protect one another. We've faced challenges, but we've also found ways to overcome them, she added, her tone hopeful. Despite her efforts, the reaction from the Valith remained muted. Kyle studied the holograms intently, occasionally tilting its head or emitting soft harmonic tones that the translators couldn't fully decipher. Finally, after several minutes of silence, it spoke. These creations are impressive, But they do not erase what we learned yesterday. Hayes froze, caught off guard by the blunt statement. She glanced at Blake, who stood slightly behind her, his arms crossed and his expression unreadable. Before she could respond, Cale continued. You spoke of war crimes committed during your conflicts. We wish to understand more about these acts. A wave of unease swept through the team. Hayes hesitated, unsure how to proceed. Sharing more details about humanity's darkest moments felt risky, but refusing to answer might damage whatever fragile trust they'd built. Taking a deep breath, she nodded. Very well. If understanding our history will help us move forward together, then we'll share what you want to know. Kyle signaled to another Valith, who handed over a small device resembling a crystalline orb. The alien explained that it would allow them to access Earth's historical archives directly. Show us, Cale said simply. Let us see for ourselves. Blake immediately stepped forward, his voice firm. That's not a good idea, he interjected. Some of those records aren't meant for outsiders. They're raw, unfiltered. You won't like what you see. Hayes shot him a warning look, but Cale focused on Blake, its glow intensifying. Would withholding the truth be better? It asked. If you claim to value honesty, then let us judge for ourselves. The room fell silent as the weight of the request sank in. Hayes exchanged a glance with Dr. Ross, who gave a hesitant nod. Reluctantly, Hayes agreed, instructing Lieutenant Daniel Carter to connect the Valith's device to the ship's database. Within moments, streams of data began flowing into the orb, carrying centuries of human history, both the triumphs and the tragedies. Over the next few hours, the Valith immersed themselves in Earth's past. They watched footage of ancient battles fought with swords and arrows, followed by scenes of trench warfare and aerial dogfights. They observed the horrors of nuclear explosions, chemical attacks, and mass executions. Each new revelation caused their luminescent forms to flicker erratically, as if struggling to process the enormity of what they were witnessing. Blake watched uneasily as the Valith absorbed the information. He noticed subtle changes in their demeanor, shifts in posture, quicker movements, and sharper tones when communicating with each other. At one point, Cale paused the playback and turned to face the humans. Why did you do these things? It asked, its voice tinged with something akin to disbelief. What purpose did they serve? Hayes struggled to find the right words. Sometimes, people make mistakes, she said softly. They act out of fear, anger, or desperation. War brings out the worst in us, but it also teaches us lessons. We've tried to learn from our errors to become better. Blake stepped forward again, unable to stay silent. It's not just about learning, he said gruffly. War forces choices. Sometimes you have to do terrible things to survive, or to protect what matters most. Cale tilted its head, studying Blake closely. And yet you call yourself civilized. How can such actions coexist with civilization? That's the paradox, Blake replied, his voice quieter now. Being civilized doesn't mean you stop fighting. It means you fight smarter and try to leave room for peace afterward. The Valith exchanged harmonic tones among themselves, their discussion incomprehensible to the humans. Eventually, Cale addressed the group once more. We will review the rest of your archives privately. Return tomorrow. We must reflect. As the humans departed, the mood aboard the Odyssey was somber. Back in the conference room, Hayes slumped into a chair, rubbing her temples. I don't know if that went well or horribly wrong, she admitted. They seem so disturbed by everything. Dr. Ross frowned, flipping through notes on her datapad. Maybe that's understandable. Their society values harmony above all else. Seeing evidence of our violence must have been shocking. Blake leaned against the wall, his arms still crossed. Shocking isn't the problem. It's how they react to it that worries me. Did anyone notice how agitated they got? That wasn't just curiosity. It was something deeper. Carter chimed in, his voice hesitant. Do you think they might decide we're too dangerous to associate with? What if they cut ties completely? Or worse, Blake muttered under his breath. What if they decide we're a threat worth eliminating? Hayes raised a hand to silence him. Let's not jump to conclusions. We don't know what they're thinking yet. For now, we wait and prepare for whatever comes next. Later that evening, Blake found himself alone in the observation deck, staring out at the shimmering landscape below. The planet's strange beauty offered little comfort as he replayed the day's events in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that they'd made a grave mistake by giving the Valith unrestricted access to Earth's history. Dr. Ross joined him a short while later, holding 2 cups of steaming coffee. She handed one to Blake before taking a seat nearby. "You look like you're carrying the weight of the galaxy on your shoulders," she said lightly. Blake accepted the cup with a nod of thanks. "Feels that way sometimes. I keep thinking about what happens if they decide we're not worth the risk, or if they think we're lying about having changed." Ross sipped her coffee thoughtfully. Change is hard to prove, especially to someone who's never seen it happen. Maybe we underestimated how different they really are. Their version of harmony might not leave room for imperfection. Blake sighed, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. Exactly. And if they see imperfection as a threat, then we're screwed. The two sat in silence for a while, watching the 3 suns dip toward the horizon. The sky transformed into a kaleidoscope of colors, casting long shadows across the alien terrain. Despite the breathtaking view, neither of them could fully appreciate it. Too much uncertainty loomed ahead. Finally, Ross broke the quiet. "Do you think there's anything we could have done differently?" Blake shrugged. "Probably not. They were bound to find out sooner or later. Better from us than from someone else. Still, I can't help wondering if we should have held back a little longer. Gained their trust first." Ross nodded slowly. "Trust takes time. Maybe we rushed it. But hindsight's always clearer, isn't it?" Blake didn't respond, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. Tomorrow would bring answers, or perhaps more questions. Either way, he knew the stakes had risen dramatically. Whatever the Valith decided, humanity's future among the stars depended on their judgment. The following morning, the human delegation returned to the meeting site, their steps slower and heavier than before. The air felt different, charged with an unspoken tension that made everyone uneasy. Captain Laura Hayes led the group, her usual confidence replaced by a quiet apprehension. Behind her, Corporal Ethan Blake scanned the surroundings with sharp eyes, his hand instinctively brushing against the sidearm at his hip. Dr. Emily Ross clutched her datapad tightly, while Lieutenant Daniel Carter adjusted his helmet visor, as if searching for something reassuring in the alien landscape. When they arrived, the Valith were already waiting. This time, however, their demeanor had changed. Gone was the serene curiosity of the first encounter. Instead, the aliens stood rigid, their glowing forms pulsing rapidly in erratic rhythms. Kale stepped forward, its body brighter than ever, casting an almost blinding light across the field. Its voice, when it spoke, carried a sharp edge that sent chills down the human spines. "You deceived us," Kale said, its harmonic tones resonating with unmistakable anger. "You claim to seek harmony, yet your history reveals a species defined by destruction. How can we trust you?" Hayes froze, her mind racing for a response. She took a cautious step forward, raising her hands in a gesture of peace. "We didn't deceive you," she replied carefully. "We shared our truth, both the good and the bad. Humanity has made mistakes, but we've also grown. We're not the same species we once were." Kyle's glow flared even brighter, causing the humans to squint. "Growth does not erase what has been done," it countered. "Your actions have left scars on your own world, and now you bring those scars here. Do you think we will allow such danger near us?" Blake stepped forward, his voice cutting through the rising tension. "You're jumping to conclusions," he said firmly. "Just because we've fought wars doesn't mean we're a threat. You don't know us well enough to judge." Kyle turned its luminous gaze toward Blake, studying him intently. "And yet, your words yesterday revealed much. You spoke of survival, of doing terrible things to protect what matters most. Tell me, Corporal Blake, what stops you from turning those instincts against us?" Blake clenched his jaw, resisting the urge to snap back. "Because we're not savages," he said evenly. "We fight when we have no other choice. But we don't go looking for trouble. If anything, we're trying to avoid it." The Valith exchanged rapid harmonic tones, their discussion indecipherable to the humans. After a moment, Kyle addressed them again, its tone colder this time. "We require time to deliberate. Leave us now." Before Hayes could protest, the Valith turned and walked away, their movements stiff and deliberate. As the shimmering figures disappeared into the distance, the human team stood in stunned silence. The shift in the Valith's attitude was undeniable and deeply troubling. Back aboard the Odyssey, the mood was grim. Hayes convened another meeting, pacing anxiously as she addressed her crew. "This isn't going well," she admitted. "They're seeing us as a threat, and I don't know how to fix it." Blake leaned against the wall, his expression grim. "Maybe there's nothing to fix. They've already made up their minds about us." Dr. Ross shook her head, unwilling to give up hope. "We can't assume that. Maybe they just need more time to process everything. Their entire worldview is based on harmony. They've probably never encountered anything like our history before." As the hours dragged on, the tension aboard the Odyssey grew unbearable. The Valith had not returned to the meeting site, and attempts to contact them through their harmonic communication devices went unanswered. Captain Laura Hayes paced the bridge, her mind racing with possibilities. Was this the end of the mission? Had humanity's first contact with an alien species ended in failure before it even truly began? Corporal Ethan Blake stood near the viewport, his arms crossed as he stared out at the shimmering landscape below. He didn't share Hayes's restless energy. Instead, he seemed eerily calm, almost resigned. Dr. Emily Ross sat at a console nearby, reviewing data from the planet's surface. Lieutenant Daniel Carter hovered uncertainly, torn between offering suggestions and staying silent. "We can't just sit here," Hayes finally said, breaking the oppressive quiet. "If they're going to make a decision about us, we need to know what it is, and soon." Blake turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "What are you suggesting, Captain? Storm their camp and demand answers?" "No," Hayes replied sharply. "But we can't afford to wait around either. We should send a small team back to their settlement, show them we're still willing to talk." Blake frowned but didn't argue further. Instead, he volunteered to lead the team himself. "If things go sideways, you'll want someone who knows how to handle it," he said simply. Hayes hesitated before nodding. "Fine. Take Carter with you. But remember, no weapons unless absolutely necessary. We're here to de-escalate, not provoke." The two men suited up quickly and descended to the planet's surface once more. The journey to the Valith settlement was tense, the air thick with unease. As they approached, they noticed subtle changes. The crystalline trees no longer chimed softly in the wind, and the ground beneath their feet felt colder, harder. Even the three suns above seemed dimmer, casting long shadows across the terrain. When they reached the outskirts of the settlement, Kale emerged, flanked by several other Valith. Their glowing forms pulsed rapidly, a clear sign of agitation. Kale's voice resonated with unmistakable hostility. "Why have you come?" Blake stepped forward, keeping his hands visible. "We came to talk, to understand where things stand. You've seen our history, warts and all. Now it's your turn to tell us what you plan to do about it." Kyle tilted its head, studying Blake closely. "You speak boldly for someone facing judgment." "Judgment implies fairness," Blake shot back. "All we're asking for is a chance to explain ourselves, to show you that we're not the monsters you think we are." For a moment, Kale said nothing, its body flickering erratically. Then, without warning, the surrounding Valith raised their arms, emitting sharp harmonic tones that caused the humans' translators to buzz loudly. Before Blake or Carter could react, a wave of energy surged toward them, knocking them off their feet. Blake groaned as he pushed himself upright, his vision swimming. "Guess talking's off the table," he muttered under his breath. He glanced at Carter, who nodded grimly. Both men knew they couldn't fight their way out of this. not against beings with technology far beyond their own. But surrender wasn't an option either. "We need to disable whatever they're using to keep us pinned down," Blake whispered urgently. "Find their power source. If we can disrupt it, we might buy enough time to get back to the ship." Carter nodded again, already scanning the area for any signs of machinery. The Valith settlement was unlike anything human engineers had ever designed, smooth organic structures that seemed to grow out of the ground itself. But embedded within these structures were faint glimmers of light, pulsing in sync with the aliens' movements. "I think I see something," Carter murmured, pointing toward a large crystalline spire at the center of the settlement. "That might be their main power grid." Blake followed his gaze, quickly formulating a plan. "All right, here's what we'll do. Create a distraction while I move in. Once I'm close enough, I'll plant a charge to overload the system. You realize this could escalate things even further," Carter warned. Blake shrugged. "Escalation's already happening. At least this way we'll have a fighting chance." Without waiting for further discussion, Blake signaled for Carter to begin his diversion. The lieutenant grabbed a flare from his pack and hurled it into the air, creating a burst of bright light that momentarily blinded the nearest Valith. Taking advantage of the confusion, Blake sprinted toward the spire, dodging bursts of energy as he went. As he reached the base of the structure, he pulled out a small explosive device and attached it carefully. Just as he finished, Kale appeared, in front of him, its glow brighter than ever. "Your actions confirm our fears," the alien leader said, its voice cold and resolute. "You are incapable of peace." Blake straightened, meeting Kale's gaze unflinchingly. "Peace isn't weakness," he replied. "And survival isn't a crime. You wanted honesty. That's what you got. But if you think destroying us proves anything, then you're no better than the wars you claim to despise." For a long moment, neither moved. Then, unexpectedly, Kale lowered its arm, the energy pulses ceasing. "Perhaps there is truth in your words," it admitted reluctantly. "But trust must be earned, not given freely." Blake exhaled slowly, realizing they'd been granted a reprieve, for now. "Then let us prove ourselves. Give us the chance to earn that trust." Kyle studied him for another moment before stepping aside, allowing Blake to retreat. Moments later, the explosive charge detonated, temporarily disabling the Valith's energy grid. With their systems compromised, the aliens withdrew, giving the humans enough time to return to the Odyssey. Back aboard the ship, Hayes greeted them with relief mixed with frustration. "What happened down there?" she demanded. Blake recounted the events succinctly, his tone matter-of-fact. "They attacked first. We retaliated only to survive. But I think I got through to Kale. At least a little." Hayes sighed heavily, rubbing her temples. "This mission has gone completely off the rails. Do you think they'll attack again?" "Hard to say," Blake admitted. "But one thing's certain, they respect strength. Showing them we won't back down might actually work in our favor." As the Odyssey prepared for departure, the Valith sent a final message, a series of harmonic tones translated as, "You are not what we expected. Perhaps that is why we must learn from you. Not just your failures, but your resilience." With the engines roaring to life, the ship lifted off, leaving the shimmering planet behind. On the observation deck, Blake stood alone, gazing out at the receding world. Dr. Ross joined him after a while, leaning against the railing beside him. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Blake shrugged. "We move on. Maybe someday they'll reach out again. Or maybe they won't. Either way, we showed them who we are, and that's all we can do." Ross nodded thoughtfully. "Do you think they'll ever fully understand us?" Blake didn't answer right away. Instead, he watched the stars streak past the viewport, lost in thought. Finally, he spoke, his voice low but steady. "Maybe. Or maybe understanding isn't the point. Sometimes, all you can do is show them who you really are, and hope they don't hate you for it." The Odyssey drifted silently through the vast expanse of space, its engines humming softly as it carried its crew farther from the shimmering planet they had left behind. The mood aboard the ship was subdued, a mix of exhaustion and lingering. Unease. Captain Laura Hayes sat in her quarters staring at the mission report sprawled across her desk. Each page felt heavier than the last, filled with questions she couldn't answer and decisions she wasn't sure she'd made correctly. In the mess hall, Corporal Ethan Blake sat alone at a corner table picking at a tray of rehydrated food. His mind replayed the events on the planet over and over again. The Valith's hostility, Kyle's accusations, and his own words during that final confrontation. He hadn't expected to get through to them, but something about Kale's reaction told him their message might have landed. Whether it would make a difference remained to be seen. Dr. Emily Ross entered the room carrying her own tray. She hesitated for a moment before sitting down across from Blake. "You look like you've got a lot on your mind," she said gently. Blake glanced up, offering a faint smirk. "Just thinking about what comes next. Wondering if we burned every bridge back there, or if there's still a chance." Ross nodded, stirring her drink absently. "I've been wondering the same thing. Do you think they'll ever reach out again?" "Hard to say," Blake replied. "They're smart, no doubt about that. But they're also cautious. If they decide we're too dangerous, they might just write us off completely." "And if they don't?" Ross pressed. Blake shrugged. "Then maybe we'll get another shot. Maybe they'll realize we're not all bad, even if we're not perfect." Ross leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think perfection is even possible? For anyone?" Blake chuckled dryly. "No. And I don't think they're looking for perfect. They're looking for manageable, something they can understand without feeling threatened." "That's a scary thought," Ross admitted. "What if they decide managing us means keeping us isolated or worse?" Blake didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stared into the distance, his jaw tightening slightly. "If it comes to that, we'll deal with it. We always do." Meanwhile, in the engineering bay, Lieutenant Daniel Carter worked alongside the rest of the technical team, running diagnostics on the ship's systems. The brief skirmish with the Valith had left some residual damage, minor fluctuations in power distribution and a few glitches in the communication array. While none of these issues were critical, Carter knew better than to ignore them. As he adjusted a panel near the main reactor, one of the junior engineers approached him. "Lieutenant, do you really think they'll come after us?" the young man asked nervously. Carter paused, considering the question. "Honestly, I don't know. But if they do, we'll be ready." The engineer frowned. "Ready how?" "They're way ahead of us technologically. What can we possibly do against them?" Carter placed a reassuring hand on the younger man's shoulder. "We adapt. That's what humans do best. We find ways to survive, no matter the odds." Back on the bridge, Hayes stood by the viewport, watching the stars streak past as the ship traveled at sublight speed. Her thoughts wandered to the Valith, their translucent forms, their harmonic voices, their unwavering dedication to harmony. She couldn't shake the feeling that humanity had misunderstood them somehow. Perhaps it wasn't just their violent history that troubled the aliens. It was the complexity of human nature itself. "Captain," a voice called from behind her. It was Dr. Ross holding a datapad. "I've been reviewing the recordings we captured during our time on the planet. There's something you should see." Hayes turned, curiosity piqued. "What is it?" Ross handed over the datapad, pointing to a specific section of footage. "This part right here. Watch Kale's reaction when Blake confronted it." Hayes played the clip, focusing intently on Kale's movements. At first glance, the alien leader appeared agitated, its glow flickering rapidly. But upon closer inspection, Hayes noticed something else, a subtle shift in its posture, almost like hesitation. When Blake mentioned resilience and survival, Kyle's body pulsed more slowly as though processing a new idea. "What does this mean?" Hayes asked. Ross shrugged. "It could mean nothing. Or it could mean that Kale, and maybe the rest of the Valith, are starting to see us differently, not just as a threat, but as survivors." Hayes mulled this over, her brow furrowing. "Survivors who fight dirty, though." "Exactly," Ross agreed. "But isn't that what makes us unique? We don't give up easily. Even when we screw up, we keep trying. Maybe that's something they admire, even if they don't fully trust us yet. Later that evening, Hayes called a meeting with her senior officers. The group gathered in the conference room, their expressions ranging from weary to wary. Hayes took a deep breath before speaking. "I've been thinking about our next steps," she began. "Clearly things didn't go as planned on the planet, but I believe we still have an opportunity to show the Valith that we're worth engaging with even if it takes time." Blake crossed his arms, leaning back in his chair. "And how do you propose we do that? From where I'm standing, they've already made up their minds about us." "Not necessarily," Hayes countered. Dr. Ross pointed out something interesting in the footage. Cale seemed conflicted, like it wasn't entirely convinced we're irredeemable. Carter raised an eyebrow. "So what? We send them flowers and hope they forgive us?" "No," Hayes said firmly. "But we can continue broadcasting messages, peaceful ones. Share more about our culture, our art, our achievements. Show them that we're more than just our worst moments." Ross nodded enthusiastically. "It's worth a shot. Communication doesn't have to stop just because we're leaving their system. If anything, maintaining contact might help ease tensions over time." Blake sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Fine, but let's not kid ourselves. If they decide we're still too risky, all the broadcasts in the galaxy won't change their minds." "Agreed," Hayes said, "but doing nothing guarantees failure. At least this way, we leave the door open, for both sides." As the days passed, the crew settled into a routine, preparing the Odyssey for its eventual return to Earth. The initial shock of their encounter with the Valith began to fade, replaced by a sense of cautious optimism. Though the mission hadn't gone as planned, they had learned valuable lessons, not just about the Valith, but about themselves. One night, Blake found himself back on the observation deck, staring out at the endless sea of stars. Despite everything, he couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Humanity wasn't perfect, and neither were the Valith. But maybe, just maybe, imperfection was something they could share. Dr. Ross joined him once more, handing him a cup of coffee. "Still brooding?" she teased lightly. Blake accepted the cup with a small smile. "Just thinking about what happens next, for them and for us." Ross leaned against the railing, sipping her drink. "Whatever happens, we gave them something to think about. That's more than most first contacts can say." Blake nodded slowly. "Yeah, guess we did." As they stood there together, the ship continued its journey home, carrying with it the weight of humanity's hopes and the promise of future encounters among the stars.